Welcome to the Faith and Feelings podcast. My name is Taylor Joy, and I'm passionate about helping you untangle and honor your emotions, authentically practice your faith, and integrate both into your everyday life so that you can experience the goodness and delight that comes from living in relationship with yourself, God, and others. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started. Have you ever poured out your feelings to God before editing your words? So many of us have internalized a narrative that stuffing down our emotions is strength. As children, we may have witnessed how being fine was praised and celebrated, and in some Christian contexts, even called spiritual maturity. So we grew into adulthood, having learned to disconnect from our own inner cries. But then there are those moments when life becomes undone, when we can't escape our own vulnerability and the backlog of our silenced emotions demands a hearing. In these moments, we need the sort of comfort that doesn't pretend things are shiny and safe or right in the world. We need a comfort that looks unflinchingly at loss and death. In this episode, my friend Lauren joins me to share about her recent miscarriage. By inviting us into her pain, she beautifully models why we have to let ourselves notice, name, and feel our emotions. It is the cost of being emotionally alive. It's the cost even of holiness. Pouring out our big feelings to God is how we experience His presence in our pain. This takes tremendous courage. But as Lauren helps us understand, unless we make space for our emotions, we cannot know the depths of God's love. It is when we finally express our unfiltered anger, grief, and fear to God that He is able to connect to our hearts. Listen in. Welcome to Faith and Feelings, Lauren. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
So when I was getting ready to launch this podcast a few months ago, I was thinking of people who I'd love to have on as guests, and you were one of the first people that came to mind. You are one of my newest friends, but as soon as we got on that Zoom call a few months ago, we connected on so many things, especially our shared experiences of growing up as missionary kids. We are getting ready to wrap up a series called When Life Doesn't Make Sense. And I'm curious about how your faith context as a child shaped your understanding of suffering. How do you think your MK experiences contributed to your initial understanding of experiences in life that don't make sense?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was the difference between what was said and then what was communicated in other ways. So I grew up in a faith context where it was vocalized that it's okay to share your anger with God. It's okay to not be okay. Like those things are acceptable. But then simultaneously being praised when you put on a strong got it, everything's okay persona. And so it was kind of this confusion of, okay, I know in theory that this is okay, but what I'm praised for is when I say, no, I'm great. God's got it. Everything is good. I don't feel really big emotions about that. Like we're good. And so it was kind of that catch-22 of I think this is okay, but I'm not actually seeing that this is praised for being okay. I'm saying that what's praised is stuffing it down and being strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I resonate with that so much. And in light of this, I'm especially grateful for the story you've so graciously offered to share with us today.
Yeah.
A recent story of when life just didn't make sense. So to get started, would you mind sharing about this experience and what it's been like for you?
Yeah. So we had a recent experience, which is what you, Taylor, and I had been talking about a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of additional layer to my story is that professionally, I do a lot of grief work, and I speak on grief and the grief tower model that I developed and talk about all the time. And so my world professionally has revolved around grief. But personally, it had been quite a while since my last big grief experience. And so I was speaking from these things happened long ago perspective when I was sharing things that had happened to me. Until recently, this last fall, so that would have been September 2023, we found out that we were pregnant and expecting a child, which was a huge surprise because we have 2 girls who are in elementary school. And so we thought we were done. I was in preterm labor with my second. And so because of that and some other factors, we thought, yep, nope, we have 2 healthy children. We're very happy with that and didn't expect to have any more biological kids. And so when we found out we were pregnant, it was a huge surprise. And we kind of went into the fall season thinking, wow, this is very different than what we were expecting to happen. And we're trying to kind of navigate that. And my husband was very much on board with it from the beginning. He, as soon as I told him and I was saying, I have no idea what we're going to do. And he goes, think of how many more grandkids we're going to have. And I was like, man, that is totally different perspective than I have right now. But the more that we talked about it and prayed through it and talked to close people in our life, the more that we started to believe this is a gift from the Lord. And there were so many things that kept coming up where people would talk about scriptures about how God gives good gifts to his children. And so that was kind of the thing that we kept saying over and over is this is a good gift. This is a good gift. And we get this gift and we get to enjoy it. And this is going to be good news of great joy. Like these were the things that we'd been kind of telling ourselves. And it honestly took me a little while to get to the point of feeling that and starting to actually get excited. I had really bad morning sickness for weeks. And so I was so miserable, which when you weren't expecting to be pregnant is a whole additional experience because you weren't expecting that. And now you're miserable every single day. So had bad morning sickness. But by the time we got to about a little over 11 weeks, we were seeming to come out of the weeds. It seemed like things were going well. I had a little bump and was starting to need to wear maternity clothes and things like that. And so it really was getting to a point where it felt real and we felt excited. And then we went for an ultrasound and again, showed up at the ultrasound. I had morning sickness that morning, seemed like everything was fine. And they started the ultrasound and it was really clear from as soon as I saw the baby, I thought that baby is not alive. And I knew instantly. And so she started doing measurements and I just kind of laid there like, I know something is not right. Like I can tell on the screen that something's not right. Like I've seen babies in ultrasounds, they're moving, like something's not right. And so she was taking measurements and I asked her, I said, is everything okay? And she said, well, since you asked, you need to know that I'm not getting a heartbeat and the baby isn't measuring how it should be, especially for how you are measuring. Like you're measuring right on track, but the baby is not. And so the baby's not alive. And we are going to take you into another room and have a conversation about what your options are. So we were completely blindsided. We went into the other room. I just remember staring at the wall, feeling numb because I didn't know what to feel. And then so it was the day before Thanksgiving that this happened. And so since it was a holiday, they basically said, we really need to do surgery today because your body obviously hasn't figured out that the baby's not living. And so at this point, for your health, and because it's a holiday, we're going to be closed for a while, like, we really need you to go to have the baby taken out this afternoon. So it was a really quick progression throughout that day of starting the day, going and excited for an ultrasound and feeling finally excited about this baby, to the end of the day coming home without that. And yeah.
What a devastating loss. I can only imagine what it must have been like for you and your husband to finally allow yourself to get to that place of excitement, only to be blindsided with such pain.
Yeah.
It feels almost cruel.
Yep. That was a word that came up a lot.
Yeah. I'm just picturing you getting up and leaving the doctor's office that day.
Yeah.
What were some of the thoughts and questions going through your mind and heart?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the very first feeling was being so confused, of like, wait, God, you said this was a gift. And I'm confused because this doesn't seem like a gift, but I was really trusting that and leaning on that for so many weeks. And so there was a lot of confusion there. And then a lot of anger, which this is the first time that I can recall feeling super angry at God without a quick, like, but I trust you and it's all good. Like I have this moment of anger, but like, it's fine. And I don't get angry easily. Like, that is the bottom of the list of emotions that I usually feel. And so it was surprising to me how angry I was, especially when I remember the moment in the room when we were waiting for the doctor to come in, the moment of realizing, oh my goodness, we're going to have to tell our girls. And they had been so excited and thinking that, I think that was where the switch flipped of like, I am so angry. Like, I can deal with this, but now I also have to pass this devastation on to my kids. And like, Lord, what are you doing? Because that's not fair. Which I know life isn't fair, but those emotions are real at the same time.
When you think about that anger towards God that couldn't be resolved within, I trust you and it's good, can you put words to any of your thoughts or questions directed at him?
It was just a lot of why. Like, why give this and then take it away? Like, it was so unexpected. It was so unplanned on purpose, right? Like, so why let this happen only to take it away? And why do this to our kids? And why let me get excited about it was another big thing. I remember the friend who was watching our kids that day, the first thing she said was, you finally got excited. And how devastating. Like, you finally were so excited. And like, the switch had flipped from like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I feel about this, to no, I'm really excited for this and excited to see our girls be big sisters and just so many things. And so it was a lot of that. Like, why would you let me get to that excitement when I could have just stayed in that, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And so I don't know, maybe it would have been easier, maybe not. But that was a big question throughout it too.
Yeah. As you've continued to process this loss over the last couple of months, how have you experienced God's heart and posture towards you? Do any pictures come to mind?
I have never felt more pursued by the Lord.
Wow.
And I remember especially the couple weeks, probably 4 weeks after the day that we lost the baby, I remember thinking, I think this is what a mustard seed of faith feels like. Like, I'm clinging to like the tiniest bit that I can muster up of like, I know that you're good, but I don't feel that right now. And I know that you're trustworthy, but also I'm really hesitant to trust you right now. And all of the things that I knew in my mind, but I wasn't feeling in the moment, and thinking, this is what that mustard seed of faith feels like, is, all right, God, I'm giving you this teeny tiny bit because that is all I can muster up right now. And it was so neat to see how the Lord pursued me. I remember the first week that we were back at church after it had probably been, maybe 3 or 4 weeks because of holidays and all the things. And so it'd been a few weeks since we'd been in church, and I was sitting there in the worship service, and the songs were being sung about the goodness of God and his holiness and all the things. And I was standing there thinking, I cannot sing these right now. Like I just can't make myself sing these songs right now. And so at some point I sat down and I just started praying, and I said, God, I feel like a bratty teenager because I feel like I'm standing here with my arms crossed, like, nope, not going to do it. And I'm sorry because I don't want to be a bratty teenager, but I just can't get there. And I remember feeling him say, you're not a bratty teenager, you're hurting, and that is okay. Just sit here with me.
Wow.
And so I just sat through the really most of the service. I don't even know what the pastor said. I just sat there with God and felt, I can't even explain it other than like, it felt like I was sitting in a living room with God and just there, just sitting, and him basically saying that over and over, you're hurting, and that's okay. Just sit here with me. And I remember having this picture of God with the biggest tears in his eyes. Like, I am also sad here with you. And yeah, this is awful. And it sucks. And we're just going to sit here together. And so that really was a huge shift for me. And that didn't take away the questions, and it didn't take away the anger right away, but it definitely, I felt like I was walking through the dark, but he was with me and saying like, yep, it's dark and it doesn't feel light, and I'm not like, it's not going to be light right now, but I'm going to walk beside you and we're going to do this together.
That's so beautiful, Lauren. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned a few minutes ago that a big part of your professional work is talking to other people about grief.
Yep.
So what has it been like for you to continue to talk to other people about grief in the middle of your own grieving process?
Yeah, it definitely added a layer of complexity. I took a break I canceled speaking events. I didn't do a whole lot for a couple of months because I didn't need to be, right? I needed to take a break. That's what needed to happen. So thankfully, I didn't have to professionally put on anything while I was going through this. I stepped back. No one in my professional life knew that this was going on other than my coworkers. And so it was really just my friends, but also my friends know in general what I do for work. And so it was a bit of a battle of how do I not be okay in a way that models not being okay well, which is really hard. And there was a lot of even anxiety in that of, oh my goodness, I talk about how to grieve well, and now I'm doing that and people are watching. And so when somebody would text and say, how are you doing? It would go through this filter of, okay, my natural answer is I'm fine, I'm good, right? Like everything's fine. But then my professional brain says, but that's not healthy. And so I need to give the real answer. But then I'm also thinking, okay, but the real answer is really messy. And is the messy going to come across as not doing this healthy? But what does healthy even look like? And And then my professional brain kicks in and goes, but I know what healthy looks like. I teach people this all the time. And so it was just this constant round and round of trying to give the real answer for how I'm doing in that moment or what I need in that moment without feeling like, again, like I have to model this well in this moment, which is hard.
Yeah. How do I show up honestly in a healthy way when everything feels so messy?
Right.
It's so complicated. I'm thinking about the person listening who might be feeling this tension right now in some of their relationships. How much do I share and with who? So practically, how have you navigated different levels of vulnerability in your relationships during this time?
Yeah, I definitely had kind of categories for these are the people that I can share the really messy things with. And then these are the people who I can give a little bit to, but they don't need to know everything. And then these are the people who get the we're making it through, yep, it's been hard answer. And so I definitely was, and I just naturally am as a person careful with the layers of people and relationships in my life and how much I share with different circles. So that was definitely a piece of it. And then with those people in those more inner circles, I remember kind of constantly thinking, what are the shoulds that I have right now of what do I feel like the answer should be? And then figuring out what is the actual answer. So trying to kind of distill like,
so good.
Okay, I know that I should say that I'm fine now because it's been 2 months and I should be past this. Or I know that I should have these answers, but what is the actual answer? What am I really feeling? And then again, who is the person that I'm talking to? Because they're the ones who get the real answers. Not that everybody's getting fake answers, but you know what I mean. The less vulnerable answers.
That's so good.
Yeah.
What strikes me about this story is that it didn't happen decades ago or even years ago. This happened months ago. How are you continuing to move forward with such ongoing pain and lack of resolution?
Yeah. I love that you asked this question because there's a tendency to only talk about our stories after we've seen the ending. And once it's resolved, then we're okay saying, all right, and here's the story and here's how it all worked out in the end. And the reality is so much of grief is that it doesn't resolve, or it does a bit, but not for quite a while. And trying to figure out, like you said, navigating that in-between space. One thing that I have been conscientious of is giving myself grace for days that feel a little more tender. And my go-to is to think, man, I'm feeling a little more heavy today. All right, I need to be extra productive and charge through, and like I should be fine. So we just need to keep moving and like get through, and it'll be okay. And so it's been a learning curve, a huge learning curve, to realize, man, I'm a little more tender today, or I would have been 30 weeks today or whatever, and just have the space for myself to be okay with it being more of a tender day, and be okay with letting some tears come, and be okay with moving a little bit slower, or instead of, I don't know, doing the extra work thing in the evening, grabbing a fiction novel, like things like that are, I have to be really mindful about because it's not my natural tendency. And that's been, it's definitely something I've been learning, but it's important. And I have seen that the hard days certainly have spaced out further and further and further. And so that's helpful too, because I know that just because today is a hard day doesn't mean tomorrow is going to be, or the next day is going to be. him.
I resonate with that so much. I can so often disconnect and use busyness or productivity as a coping mechanism to not feel. And it requires so much courage to feel and to offer compassion towards ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a final question, would you speak for a moment to the person who might be going through a similar situation right now? What would you say to them? What encouragement would you give?
I think if they're anything like you and me, Taylor, I would say that stuffing it down isn't strength. And I definitely grew up thinking stuffing it down is strength. And that's what's praised, and that's what's celebrated, and that's what's usually called maturity or things like that. And learning that being able to feel the weight of the hard is strength. That takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength. I think I would also say that, like I was talking about earlier, I have never experienced the Lord so close and so tender toward me. And that had to start with me giving all of my difficult emotions in really sometimes unfiltered ways. And that isn't something that I had an experience where I had those same unfiltered thoughts in the ways that I did this time. And so while I've definitely shared hard things with the Lord and told him that I'm angry about this, that, or the other, this was a different level of I am feeling deeply all of these things and almost dumping them on God. And it was in that I was also able to see him show up in really amazing ways. And so that would be another thing, is don't hold back those questions and those hard feelings from the Lord, because it's not just that he can handle them, which I think is often the thing we're told, which is true, but it's not just that he can handle them, it's that he can take those and use them in ways that connect you to him on a deeper heart level than has ever happened, which is true for any relationship, right? Like we grow deeper in relationships when we're willing to have really hard conversations. And that's certainly true with the Lord too.
Yeah, he is not going to be shaken or overwhelmed. God welcomes us to bring all of our emotions to him and wants to connect with us in them. That's really beautiful, Lauren. Thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been a gift to me, and I know it will be to many others as well.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Over and over again, the pages of Scripture testify that God does not take away our vulnerability. He enters into it. God can handle our big feelings. He's not surprised by them. Rather, he invites us to speak them, to put words to our emotions, and to find language to express what is really going on inside of us. He's not merely okay with this, but actually gives us the words and lines to take our anger, grief, and fear to him. Think of the Psalms. He writes them for us because he knows how difficult it can be. I'll be sharing more reflections from the episode in this week's Substack. If you'd like to receive these Wednesday emails, you can subscribe through the link in the show notes. Until next week. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram at TaylorJoy. If this conversation was helpful and you'd like more information about my other offerings to engage your story more deeply, check out my website, taylorjoymurray.co.